What's up, 49er faithful? Welcome to another episode here with Sue and Schuh. We are loving it. Still on a working title. I'm your host, Rob Schuh, joined today by my fantastic guest and regular occurrence here with So Real Sunil of So Real Sports. Sunil, how you doing today, man?
Doing fantastic, man. Had a couple days to digest. For bye week for us, a lot's going on, man. I said that there's going to be some drama coming through this week, and it's already starting to bubble up a little bit. So a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about, a lot of drama. I'll be honest. I had to throw on a little extra Niners gear today because, it has been a tough week so far. It has been painful to have a third loss in a row. It is tough the way in which the 49ers are losing these three games. I won't get into any of the topics that we're going to cover today just yet and spoil any of them. But, man, there is a lot to cover because this is not a situation where you have a bad team losing games in my book. This is a much more complicated situation. Thankfully, 49ers fans have us here to break this down for them. So today we're going to get into our usual grading topics here, go through and give our grades for the performances on the offense, defense, special teams, and coaching. But first of all, I want to throw out a couple of stats before we get into it. So the 49ers against the Cardinals on Sunday, unfortunately walking away with a loss. But in total yardage, you actually saw the 49ers edge out the Arizona Cardinals 338 to 304. It broke down with the 49ers 186 passing yards on the day, Cardinals 210. Rushing yards, 49ers 152. Vast majority of those going to our quarterback, Trey Lance, and the Cardinals 94. Penalties, 7 for 60, continue to be an issue. Turnovers, an even battle on Sunday, thankfully. And time of possession, again, edged out for the 49ers, 32 to 28. So again, another game where the 49ers win the total yardage game, win the time of possession, and end up losing the game. So let's jump right into the grades and talk about the most important position, which would be the quarterback position. I gave the quarterback position a solid C. Sunil, how did you have it ranked out?
Yeah, so I think that it depends on how you grade this. And the way that I want to grade it is not taking into any consideration that Trey Lance is a rookie. Because at this point, he's our starting quarterback, and he shouldn't get a grade on a curve because at the end of the day, we're looking for this team to get wins, and a loss by a rookie quarterback doesn't necessarily make it that much better, right? It's a loss. It takes us further away from our goal of making the playoffs. So you got to judge him based off of what he did to help this team win. So I'm also giving him a solid C, but I'd probably drop it actually to a C minus. And the reason for that is because I think that Trey did a lot of good things. But if you look at his completion percentage, well below where it needs to be. If you look at the amount of points that he was able to put on the board, way lower than it needs to be. And even though he is good at moving the chains, we obviously had the time of possession numbers that you put up, the yards that we put up, so on and so forth. It was still up to these receivers to make really, really difficult catches. And yeah, that also was that Trey had to make some difficult throws. But until he becomes a better passer of the ball, and until we're able to put more points on the board, you can't give the quarterback, that great of a grade, because at the end of the day, like you said, it's the most important position. And even though there were receivers that drop balls and things of that nature, quarterback still has to figure out a way to get points on the board. And that was our biggest Achilles heel. We didn't put enough points on the board. So I'm giving him a C minus, though I do think that I do see a silver lining in the fact that I do think that this offense is going to be better if Trey Lance continues to be the starter.
Yeah, it's frustrating to watch. Julio is coming in on you here, Sunil. Are you ready for the answer here? Sunil, you can you can grade him without rookie freebie, but wouldn't you also have to compare to 49ers best alternative, aka Jimmy G, if you're not going to give Trey the rookie card?
Sure. I mean, and if you guys have been watching the show, and Rob could attest to this, how have my Jimmy G grades been going?
They've been pretty harsh, right? You haven't taken it easy on the guy.
Right. So that's what I'm trying to say, is that I have to grade him as a starting quarterback, not a rookie starting quarterback.
Yeah.
And I look at the position, how well they did to help this team win. And look, the offense has continuously been the reason why we've lost these games. And that hasn't been different if Jimmy G was there or if Trey was there.
Yeah, I was highly disappointed by the amount of support that as a rookie quarterback coming in, the 49ers were unable to provide to Trey Lance. It was mind-boggling to me, and we'll obviously touch on this when we get into the coaching grades, but I just can't believe the amount of pressure, the level of game planning that was dumped on Trey Lance's shoulders for this game. It was basically a Trey day, and that seems unfair to the rookie to put so much weight on him to go out there and be the entirety of this offense. And he didn't get the help from the players on the offense. You mentioned the drops from the wide receivers. That was absolutely not what a rookie needs as far as support goes from his supporting cast. Mm-hmm. I thought I saw when he scrambled on his own, you saw the potential. I mean, I went back through and rewatched the start of that game just before this broadcast, and it was hard to do because, you know, it's an emotional letdown to have lost this game the way in which we did. But what I will say is the 49ers were absolutely moving the ball. I mean, it was impressive, the things he was able to do. Now, there were a lot of hiccups, a lot of things going on that didn't assist him in getting the job done. A lot of situational football where clearly he wasn't prepared to execute. But as far as the ability to move the ball, the ability to push it down the field, the ability to create with his legs, in particular, when things break down in the pocket, I thought I saw a lot of things that I could get excited for with Trey Lance. Absolutely. And I agree that the vast majority of things that were cause for concern were not Trey's doing. Yeah,
I mean, the incompletion percentage is, because yes. I do think that there is some room for understanding how hard he throws the ball. And I think that seems to be a little bit of an issue. He does sail the ball high. Whether that be a velocity issue or a mechanics issue, I'm not sure. I'm not good enough at the X's and O's to be able to give that. But there clearly is something that when he misses, Rob, he misses high. So that's something that definitely needs to be fixed. And yeah, I mean, clearly his mobility is an asset. This offensive line, and we're going to get into that soon, but this offensive line would have let a lot more sacks go if it wasn't for Trey being able to scramble, move out of the pocket, and not be sacked for loss, right? So, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that Trey Lance should be the starter moving forward, but it's not like he deserves an A or a B with this game. Like, there's still a lot of room for improvement, and we are more excited about him than Jimmy, but that doesn't mean we got to go overblown and just be like, oh, because we think Jimmy would have probably been a D or an F in this game, that Trey should be a B or A, right? He still didn't play well enough for us to win this game.
No, he didn't. And to me, there were three areas where he struggled the most. The first being the situational football, the things like the 4th and 1 at the goal line, 4th and goal at the 1. And a couple of plays like that where he didn't seem to be in the right. He didn't execute on those plays in the way that he needed to in order to get it done, basically. Though that was definitely an area of concern. The sailed passes was another area of concern. And then, and this may be tied to the sailed passes, you could almost sense that he was too excited coming into the game because he was running into his blockers on some of those quarterback draws that he came up the middle. There were several instances where he actually ran into the back of Tomlinson, McGlinchey, and even Trent Williams on one occasion, wherein I was like, Trey, you're a big guy. Stop hitting our linemen in the back of their knees, right? We can't have that. But it did scream to me, you know, the rookie scenario. But the game plan, is, to me, much more at fault than the quarterback, and we'll get into that when we talk about the coaching. And so I agree with you that there was good, there was bad, balances out to that C for the quarterback. Couple of comments that are flowing in here. We got Joe Mama talking about, first and foremost, even though Kyle called a ridiculous game on Sunday, I agree with your sentiment there. He can't go back to Jimmy this year. It's a funny thing you bring that up, Joe Mama, because we will be talking about that very subject after we get through our grading segment here. We will talk about who should and could be starting when we come back from the bye. All right, here we go. We got one from Amazon. Says, Rob, you're the man. Appreciate that. You the man. That's why they call us Niners faithful. Got to have faith. I'll just take that opportunity to say, yes, I am wearing my Niners gear, trying to amp myself up because I do try to stay within the positivity and not get beat down. And right now, Niner faithful is a time that you could feel beat down, that you could feel that there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Sunil and I are here to give you the straight dope, to give you the real deal, but we're also going to leave you with a little bit of hope, or at least I will. Sunil might be too negative for that. I don't know. We'll find out. But I definitely will try to lay down some positivity for you, even if it's a little false hope. And Sunil will call that out if I do. So, so we'll let you know.
I think that faith is very, very important, but it shouldn't blind you to serious issues, right? You could have faith, but if there's actual things that need to be fixed, faith doesn't solve those things. We have to come up with solutions.
Yes. Waruna says it well here. We are here to support Trey Lance. Being faithful, being a good fan does mean being supportive of your team. But to your point, Sunil, it doesn't stop you and I from calling out major flaws within this team, from pointing out areas of concern, and from talking about those areas that the 49ers need to improve if they want to be a serious contender. All right, let's move on to our running backs grade that we have here. And I'm going to let you start off with this one, and I'll come in next.
Yeah, I got to give this an incomplete. And the reason why I give it an incomplete is they weren't used. It was like 10 rushes between the two of these guys, and not for lack of production. I think Mitchell looked just as great as he was, in the Detroit game when he came in and kind of, steadied the running back boat. Trey Sermon got one carry, and it went for like 6-7 yards. That should have been a tackle for loss, but he used his quickness to outrun, a guy to the edge and make it a productive play. But they got no opportunities to really have a big game. So to me, I can't give them a bad grade, even though the numbers would show like a non-productive game. But I give them an incomplete, Robin. We haven't done an incomplete on this show. I don't know if it's part of the rules, but I really don't blame the running backs at all for their lack of production. I blame the game plan and whoever's making those decisions. We all know who's making those decisions.
We all know who's making those decisions.
But yeah, they weren't used, so I have to give them an incomplete, Rob.
I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, Sunil and I do not compare these notes before we give our grades here. And the incomplete is something that had not been used to this point. And I am not lying nor changing anything. I am looking dead at my notes next to running backs. And what do I have there, Sunil? I have incomplete. Incomplete, followed by 9 carries for Mitchell. Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. 9 carries. You scripted... Well, it's not scripted. You called 12 runs for Trey Lance. 12. He carried the ball 16 times, 4 of which were his scrambles out of the pocket. Right. 12 times Kyle dialed up. Trey's keeping it. But only 9 for Mitchell? Like, you have got to be kidding me on that. So I'm with you 100%. This is an incomplete grade.
And Rob, this is coming off of a Trey Sermon game last week, where he averaged 4.7 yards per carry. So for him to only get 1 carry is almost as criminal as, if not more criminal, than Mitchell getting 9 coming off of an injury.
And this is a team, Sunil, that is giving up, in the Arizona Cardinals, is giving up an average of 5.4 yards per carry. So this is a team that is absolutely vulnerable to the run. And yes, the 49ers ran for 150 plus, but the vast majority of that coming from their rookie quarterback. Again, putting the weight on the rookie. I love the scrambles. I love when he escapes with his legs. That's the advantage of Trey Lance. That is the beauty of having a mobile quarterback.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that you have to design 12 plays where you're running him into the heart of the defense. It was perplexing to me. The running backs felt like they were having success. I will call out, and this will come up again when we do the offensive line grades, but it really was a one-directional success day. It was only successful when running off of the left side for the 49ers. I mean, we got blown up on many of those attempts that went to the right. There were a couple that got blown up in the backfield that stalled drives. Certainly that right side of the line did no favors for the backs. But again, this isn't a scenario where you had 20 carries and they were unable to maintain a reasonable average. You just didn't feed them enough. They were getting the yards. They were getting the first downs, but they weren't fed enough. It just is mind-boggling to me that you could have so few carries
and
for
Rob,
running backs.
It wasn't a situational thing either, because this game was never more than one score for majority of it till the fourth quarter, right?
Yeah, at most 10 points.
Yeah, so it wasn't a thing where, this game is slipping away, so we need to get more into the pass game, or Trey was really successful with these quarterback draws and so on and so forth. They weren't very successful. Like, those were the least amount of yards we were getting, was when Trey was on these runs that were scripted for him or like called for him. We were getting more from the one play that Trey Sermon got and what Mitchell was being able to do. They would average more yards per carry than Trey did, minus obviously those scrambles where he was able to be extremely effective.
Right. You've got Bryant Culp coming in here. We have no running game this year. I actually sort of disagree with that take, in that we've had a fairly successful running game this year, but frustratingly, maddeningly, the head coach doesn't seem to want to commit to it, doesn't want to seem to work it in consistently to the game plan in a normal way. It feels as if all the run plays that are being called are trying to out scheme the other team, as opposed to just taking the players that you have that can and will get the yardage needed and attacking the other team. It feels as if a bit more of a dance is occurring as opposed to physically dominating other teams, as it seems we should be able to within the run game.
I get a lot of pushback and criticism because I bring up 2019 a lot, but I don't think this team is the 2019 team, obviously, but there's certain aspects of that 2019 run that we had that still could be implemented today. And I don't know if you remember, Rob, but back in 2019, 2020, whenever George Kittle went up during the press conference, he always mentioned a number. There was a certain number of runs per game that Shanahan and that team used to preach. I think the number was 30. And they said, if we get to 30 runs, we know that we're going to dominate this game, or we're going to win this game, right? And for some reason, even though I don't think we have bad running backs, I think our running backs are just as competent as the running backs we had in 2019 between Mitchell and Sermon, at least those two. We've completely gotten away of trying to run the ball 30 times per game. And that isn't just a baby Shanahan thing. That's Papa Shanahan's mentality too, is to run the ball. You're a run first team. That's what, you've always been one of the least amount attempts per game in the passing game. All of Shanahan's offenses, but when he was an offensive coordinator or a head coach, have always been in the bottom 5 of passes attempted per game. And for some reason, this year, he's just like, yeah, I'm not going to be that way anymore. And it's weird.
It is very strange. And certainly, I mean, it hurts that you lose Raheem Mostert at the beginning of the season. But to your point, this is still a deep running back room, and it's a bit inexplicable to me. Julio commented on the running back situation, saying Sermon underutilized for sure, but I think Kyle was trying to save Mitchell's health. That being said, he didn't care much for the health of his QB2, Trey. I mean, it's a dig at the coach, but it's a fair one. It's a fair criticism. I have heard rumors about that there was a pitch count for Mitchell, but that doesn't explain why not utilize Sermon, to Julio's point here, right? You just pointed out, Sunil, that we came off a week where Sermon was lights out the prior week, right? Running very well. Seemed as if the offense was clicking for him. Seemed as if the one cut go concept had really hit home. And then he doesn't get a carry until the fourth quarter of the game. It just doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we got more comments rolling in here. Try to get to a couple of these before we roll into our receivers' grades. But here we go with one from Dean. Dean says, I think the frustration stems from the promise of being contenders from the front office. And it seems Kyle is half stepping and half giving off Harbaugh vibes. I think there's real issues with who number 3 was. Interesting. Back to the quarterback conundrum. What I think is absolutely fair is the reason that 49ers fans are as upset as they are is expectations. That is absolutely true, and I count myself amongst them because I came into this season with significant expectations and have been let down to this point.
I tweeted this earlier. If the same thing continues to happen to you 4 out of 5 years, that's not bad luck. That is a trend based off of the actions and the decisions that you make. It's not only about expectations, Rob. This is a team that hasn't performed. How are we that much better than the Miami Dolphins or, these other teams that are always capable of making the playoffs, but never do? How are we that much better than the Dallas Cowboys? We made it to one Super Bowl. We didn't win it, but the other years, we're not even sniffing the playoffs. It's not like we're even a game out. We're like in the top. We're in lottery pick, basically. Yeah. Top 14 picks, 4 out of 5 years. And then one year we made it to the Super Bowl, and we continue to give that clout because of that 1 year. But 4 out of, maybe that's the anomaly. That is the anomaly. And the rest of the team is a team that doesn't make the playoffs. So I don't think it has anything to do with expectation. I think we've been hypnotized into thinking that we are a better team than what we actually are.
Yeah, I certainly believe that we all want this team to be better than it currently is, right? We all thought coming in that it was better than it currently is, but it truly is. For me, I had expectations around how this offense was going to perform and how this defense was going to perform. And to this point, the defense has overwhelmed me in positivity and the offense not so much. And part of that is what we're leading into right now with our grades is the receivers, the receiving core. So we're lumping our wide receivers and tight ends together here. This was a group that coming into the year, I was pretty high on. I believe that we could and would have 3,000-yard receivers. And I know now that that was really, really foolish because I believed foolishly that not only would our Deebo Samuel hero so far have the season that he's having, which thankfully he did, and thankfully drafted in a lot of my fantasy football leagues, but I foolishly believed that Brandon Ayuk was going to have a 1,000-yard season and that George Kittle would have a 1,000-yard season. And don't get me wrong, it's not too late for those things to happen, but my God, would it be a miracle at this point. When you look at the way in which they have performed to date, it would be a real miracle to have that come through. So for this past game, how I thought they graded out was a C+. For me, it was average and then some. And the only plus there, again, to me is Deebo. And if we're talking about as a pass catcher, Juice, right, who also caught 3 balls that day. But the drops have to stop. You cannot have a rookie quarterback coming out for his first start and have 3 drops on the night. That's just unacceptable to me.
Yeah, I almost gave this another incomplete, Rob, but there were those drops. And the reason why I was going to give this an incomplete is because what was up with these personnel packages? Why is Travis Benjamin on the field and Brandon Ayuk being used either as a decoy or sitting on the bench, standing on the sideline? Like, I don't think this receiving core is having an opportunity to be the explosive receiving core that you mentioned that you were hoping for. Obviously, Kittle is injured, but Ayuk is getting absolutely not enough targets. And he caught 2 out of 3 balls. The 2 catches that he had were ridiculous. One was
Ridiculous.
an amazingly thrown ball by Trey Lance, perfect velocity, perfect positioning, put it and Brandon Ayuk just did what his job as far as catching a very difficult catch because of where the defender was at that moment. And then the second catch was one of the most ridiculous catches that I have seen. The way he bodied the person and caught it with one hand, that is elite ball skills from an elite receiver. The only catch he didn't make was an uncatchable ball where Trey Lance sailed the ball high on Brandon Ayuk. And then obviously Debo was making some great catches. But to me, the wide receivers are a product of the personnel that's being put out there. And then the lack of utilization. Like it's like if you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis for the Lakers, and you're having Talon Horton Tucker take all the shots. It's like, yeah, the team is gonna look like they're not scoring very much, but it's because the 2 superstars on the team are not getting the ball enough, right? They're not even the ones that are being utilized. And obviously, Brandon Ayuk and Debo aren't LeBron and AD, but they can be. They're the best 2 receivers we have, and the fact that they're not getting 80% of the opportunities is the reason why this receiving core isn't doing as well as it should be doing. And that's in my book. So I give it a C. But yeah, it almost got an incomplete just because I really don't blame these receivers.
Cassidy doesn't either. Cassidy with the comment is in agreement here. Why not use Trent Sherfield and Brandon Ayuk more often? That's a damn good question, Cassidy. Sunil asked the same thing of our head coach. It is perplexing when you hear things, and we'll touch on this later because John Lynch was on KMBR, I believe, where he's talking about Brandon Ayuk and talking about earning his role there. And we'll get into that specific comment later in the show. But suffice it to say that from a fan perspective, when you watch the game and you watch Brandon Ayuk with those multiple spectacular catches and the way in which he operates in space, it begs the question of what more do you need to see? Like what are we talking about here? As a fan, I am consistently left wondering, why are we not getting this gentleman the ball? I can't believe the decision to bring in Travis Benjamin for significant snaps as opposed to, I mean, you're elevate. Yes. Okay. He is a veteran. I get that. He should be able to come in off the street and be fresh, but you're also expecting somebody who was on the practice squad, who got elevated, who's getting limited reps in practice, who hasn't seen game action to this point in the season, and now you're going to call him up as opposed to going with the stud who's already on the roster, already getting the practice reps, and already flashing that he can excel there. It really is perplexing there, and not the fault of the receiving core, right? That's not decided by them. They don't say, well, it's my turn to go on the field now, Mr. Shanahan, I'd like to get in now. No, they're told when to platoon in and out, and so I agree with you that that's not on them. I thought that they, did enough to be serviceable, but didn't help out the rookie and need to get a handle on those drops. I understand how difficult a wobbler could be to catch. You watch a tipped pass, and they are almost never caught by the receiver, even when the receiver is far enough away from the tip to retrain their eyes and refocus on the ball to catch it, because it's moving at this odd way. And I am certain that a wobbler from Lance, at the rate of speed he chucks that ball and the way in which it's moving, would be difficult. That said, if you are a professional wide receiver in the National Football League and that ball hits you in the hands, you got to catch it.
Right.
All right, moving on to the next group, the offensive line here. I'll start out on this one because I thought that they were about average, but a little below average. So I had to go with a C minus on this one. I mean, Trent Williams continues to be Trent Williams. He is the anchor on the left side there. Yes, he was flagged for a holding penalty, but quite frankly, who wasn't in this game for the 49ers? And he's just a monster on that left side. He's holding it down, but the right side of this line is struggling. For me, the game flipped a little bit from last week where I thought that Alex Mack was atrocious and Brunskill was just bad. In this one, I thought Brunskill was absolutely terrible. He was a turnstile. It seemed as if J.J. Watt just abused him like a stepchild in this occurrence. It was ugly. It was something to behold. And to me, it's just an area of weakness that shut down running to the right for the entirety of the game.
Yeah, this offensive line doesn't get a passing grade from me. It's a D. And this game, if maybe Jimmy was back there, I think there would have been a lot more sacks. And it was just the elusiveness of a Trey Lance that caused this offensive line to not have the sack numbers. But if you look at the pressures, if you look at the amount of push that constantly the line of scrimmage was constantly getting pushed into the backfield, to me, this offensive line has been the most disappointing aspect of this team as far as personnel. I really thought that Alex Mack was going to come in and make a big difference with his leadership and just his overall play. I thought that he was going to get he still had a year or two of maybe not elite, but at least good to great football left in him. And other than Trent Williams, everybody in here is replaceable to me. There's not a player on this team that on that offensive line that I look to and say there's potential there. I think that all of these guys should get wiped clean, and we should bring in a brand new offensive line. However, that's not a realistic solution because it would just be just as bad, because finding offensive linemen is really, really tough. But this season, I think, was lost the minute they went after Alex Mack over Corey Linsley. If Corey Linsley was our center, I think this would be a much different situation. But this offensive line has been atrocious and has been saved by a couple of things. Jimmy G, for all of his flaws, has a very, very quick release, which saves the offensive line. And Trey Lance has ridiculous elusiveness. Keep using elusivity, trying to make it a word, but
Hey,
elusiveness.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it makes me sound like I went to college. But elusiveness, which I did, by the way, elusiveness, and I think both of those things are masking a pretty terrible offensive line.
Yeah, I will certainly concede to that point that Trey's feet, his escapability, absolutely negated a couple of would-be sacks, because there certainly were pressures. And you're right also about Jimmy G and the quick release, and that, again, making this offensive line look just a little bit better than it has, which it's looked pretty bad to this point. I think that Avtar, with his comment here, is seeing the same thing. Right side of the O-line is getting worse every week. I mean, you could argue potentially that the level of competition has gone up as well, but you wonder if that's actually the case with Seattle. Certainly this week against Arizona, the level of competition had something to do with it. That is a good defense, but I'm with him that the right side has been atrocious. And then Julio raises the question here, given Kyle's poor judgment of Sermon, which to this point seems to be true, that he is serviceable but not getting any carries, or didn't this week. Ayuk, who is in the doghouse. Trey, who he's trying to kill on a weekly basis going forward. And Lenore, who apparently we're going to start people off the street over, even though he's had some serviceable games till now. You have to wonder if Banks is better than we've been led to believe. It's a fair question. You know, we haven't even seen, we have no idea what he would be like against NFL competition in a real game.
Yeah. I mean,
Crazy.
At this point, it's not, the fact that there's this many conspiracy theories doesn't bode well for the 49ers.
This doesn't.
This is very new, Rob. Like, we've been fans of this team. You know, we've obviously only been covering it in this way for, this year. but I haven't seen this many conspiratorial things and this much angst from the 49er fan base in quite some time. So it is very, very disappointing, and seems like some things are unraveling before our eyes.
It does seem like that. And Bryant, with his comment here, says what I think a lot of 49ers fans are feeling at this very moment, which is that the 49ers are on the verge of a rebuild. It has that feeling to it. And I think, I hope, and my logical side, not just my emotional side with the hope, but my logical side as well, says that it's a bit too early to panic too much, but I could be being a homer there. Let's get to something that's a little more positive, and that is, let's scrap the offensive side of the ball, because that was atrocious. They put up 10 points, they moved the ball, but couldn't get it into the damn end zone. Let's switch it over to a little more positive side and talk about the defensive grades for this week. Let's talk about DeMeco Ryans' unit. And let's start off on a high note. Let's start off with the defensive line. Sunil, how'd you feel about how the defensive line performed against Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals?
Yeah, before I get into that, I want to do this because we lump in the coaches. And unfortunately, there's multiple coaches, and it's not just DeMeco Ryans. I've done this on every stream that I've done since this game. DeMeco Ryans gets standing ovation for me. He has gone above and beyond of what the expectations are. And he is so much better than what Salah was in his first year. And this defense would be one of the most talked about defenses in the NFL based off of what DeMeco Ryans has been doing as the defensive coordinator, if this team wasn't losing all of these games. Because if you think about the back-to-back weeks he just had, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, and each game, the defense looked better and better and better. So going directly to your question, this defensive line to me gets an A. And the reason for it is, one, they made Kyler Murray's life difficult in the backfield. And the second biggest thing is they solved a problem that this 49ers defense has always had, and that is the mobile quarterback.
Containment.
And props to Eric Armstead, props to Nick Bosa, because their gap discipline was like some of the best that I've ever seen, because they stayed disciplined and always made Kyler Murray go back into the middle versus outside. And because of that, Kyler Murray wasn't able to beat us with his legs. It forced him to be an actual pocket quarterback. And they were averaging 35 points per game, Rob. And they struggled to put up 17 points against this defense with who I think is the best receiver in the league and some really, really good second and third options on a cornerback that's supposedly our biggest weakness, and they struggled to put up 17 points against this defense. So this defensive line, by all estimations to me, did exactly what they needed to do, and it's sad that they're being left hanging by an offense that can't put up points.
What a great way to put it there, Sunil. Leaving the offense hanging is so frustrating. The offense leaving the defense hanging is so frustrating, because the performance by the defense is that damn good that it's just such a shame for it to go to waste. And I agree with your standing ovation for DeMeco Ryans. I thought that he did struggle a bit against Green Bay in making adjustments, but then came back incredibly strong the past 2 weeks. And I'm not going to fault him entirely for being unable to stop Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams, because in my mind, while it is close and I understand you giving the edge to D-Hop, I think that that Davante would be the best receiver in the league and is near impossible to stop on any week. And Rodgers had one of his best games. I mean, just some of those dimes that he threw against us in week 3 were in my mind, somewhat unstoppable, and therefore I don't fault this defense for it. And as it picked up the last 2 weeks, really incredible. So I'm with you there. And I've got the same grade. Defensive line was an A. They absolutely held Murray in check. To your point, this is an offense that had been putting up 35 every week. They were able to hold them. It was a close game. It was held in check the entirety of the game. I believe that he only broke contain really once, where Bosa came inside and he managed to get outside of him. But even that wasn't egregious. He had fewer than 250 yards passing. And when you have the balanced attack that the Cardinals do, I think they had 6 players coming into the game with 15 catches or more. And true Max, is it Max Williams, the tight end that got knocked out?
Yeah.
Yeah, so unfortunate injury to him early in the game. But even so, still had 4 wide receivers and a running back that all are very capable pass catchers. And the 49ers were able to keep them in check primarily because of this defensive line and the job that they did in a uniform pass rush, getting pressure but not breaking containment. I honestly couldn't have asked for a better game from them. And to your point, that's what makes it sting that much more when you lose the game and you had such a dominant performance. I mean, credit to my man Nick Bosa is on pace for a hell of a season with these sack totals lining up. I feel pretty good about not having placed the bet for Fred Warner to win Defensive Player of the Year, because things aren't breaking that way for my man All-Pro Fred. But I do feel bad for not placing the bet on Bosa, because any game where he busts out and has 3 or 4 sacks, and we could be looking at a 20-plus sack season from my man here. So
Right.
It could be a Defensive Player of the Year type of season for Nick Bosa if things keep up as they are. But what if it's on a team with a losing record? You know, it's terrible. It's terrible. And it makes me feel sad when I get into how dominant this defensive line is and the simple fact that we lost that game. All right, moving on from our defensive line into our linebackers. For me, this one was a tough one to grade because I felt that they played well. They had a decent game. They contained the run. They contained Kyler Murray. It was solid tackling for the most part. I do wonder if we see more of Hufanga going forward over Marcel Harris after the bye until Big Play Dre is able to return. But I saw this as a decent performance for the linebackers, and I gave them a B.
Yeah, I agree. I think a B is fair. They didn't do anything out of the ordinary to like be an A. And if we're giving an A to the defensive line, they definitely didn't play to the level of the defensive line. But look, the running game didn't get off, and Chase Edmonds, even though he was coming off of an injury, was a little nicked up. It's still a very, very good running back. So is James Conner. He's a decent running back. And we had been gashed in the running game, and we weren't. This running game rushing attack that the Cardinals had didn't gash us. And a lot of that plays into the linebackers getting up into the line and being sound tacklers. I think Fred Warner is quietly having a really, really good season, but it's extremely quiet, right? It's
Very
not
quiet.
any
Very
of those
quiet.
wow moments that we're used to seeing from Fred Warner. And I think sometimes because it's not those explosive plays, breaking up passes and interceptions and stuff like that, it makes us think that he's not having that good of a season. And I've been one to criticize Fred, but when you actually look at the numbers and see what he's doing, he is playing, pretty solid ball. I think Azeez had some moments there that were really good against in protection and in as far as tackling and whatnot. So yeah, I think a B is fair. They weren't super great, but they definitely weren't weaknesses or liabilities. So they get a solid B to me as well.
Yeah, I feel like Alshire has performed well since coming in for Dre's injury. I do wonder about that third spot, but it's such a minor role within the defense that it is not a critical position of need for the 49ers. But I did like what I saw from Hufanga, especially when he got into Kyler Murray's face and caused that errant throw. That was fantastic defense. And he's just a baller. He seems to find himself in the right places at the right times.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on to that depleted but very serviceable secondary that has played, in my estimation, significantly better than the group is made up of. Emmanuel Mosley is having a great season to this point. You wonder what it could have been if it weren't for the injury to Jason Verrett. But I feel as though Josh Norman, a few more penalties than you'd like to see, but he has been reasonably sound in coverage. And that to me is all that's expected from this group. That is what is needed from this group. Is this group needs to play sound football. They need to be in the proper position to stop the big plays. They can't allow the big over the top plays beyond the defense. They have to be sound in coverage, and the D line is what's going to set this defense apart. So to me, the expectations for the secondary are low. I was not pleased with the continuation of penalties that are an issue for this group. And I understand some of those are veteran move, and also some were ticky-tack this week. But I will say, on the positive, they didn't allow a 100-yard receiver in a group that is incredibly talented. So for me, that was a B-plus effort.
Yeah, I think I'd give it more of a B minus, just because I think those penalties were costly. They helped the drives move forward, but they got that Dante Johnson tackle for the fumble. I think obviously was really great and great timing. Unfortunately, it only led to a field goal, but definitely was timely and needed. Hopkins only got, in the fourth quarter, he had that drive where he kind of dominated, but it was more not luck, but opportunity meets preparation in a really, really elite receiver. The way that ball was underthrown and he was able to adjust to it, and it kind of made Jimmy Ward look out of position when it was just like he didn't expect the ball to be that underthrown. And then D-Hop made that ridiculous catch in the end zone, which, D-Hop is D-Hop for a reason. He's going to make that. Rondell Moore had a ridiculous catch on the sideline that was, kind of like a momentum shifter as well. But I give him a B minus, because until they could – those penalties could stop being momentum shifters in the way that instead of getting the guys off the field, it continues to extend a drive. That's one thing that the secondary needs to get better at, whether it's that they're out of position, they're just physically outmatched, whatever the case may be, figure it out, because those pass interference balls are killer. And think about how great this defense would be if they could clean up those pass interferences. I'm talking about multiple 3-and-outs, multiple situations, and we're talking about maybe even the Cardinals not even score. Like, that could be 10 points off the board, really, if it wasn't for these pass interference plays.
Yeah, the other thing that I'll throw out there, the penalties are a big one for sure. Got to clean that up. We do also need to force more turnovers. It is an issue. I thought that it was amazing the fact that in practice this week we saw a video of the exact same thing that Dante Johnson ended up doing in game. Right? It just goes to show situational preparedness. Along the sideline, exactly what they had been practicing. Dante Johnson comes in, rips out the ball, and then as it's bouncing along the sideline, manages to recover it himself. I mean, that was a spectacular play by, let's just be honest about it, an otherwise unspectacular player for the most part. But give him credit for that play. It was amazing. I will say that I was a bit disappointed in the way in which Jimmy Ward did not locate that ball on the DeAndre Hopkins catch. I thought he had enough time to at least make a play on it, and it didn't feel as if the response was there. And Jimmy's ball skills are an area of opportunity for him. He has not been able to corral many interceptions in his career. I want to say his last pick was like 2016.
Right. So the only reason why I'll throw Jimmy Ward some bail is because I think he was getting ready for a jump ball with D-Hop, who's probably one of the best jump ball catchers in the league, if not the best. And you could tell the way he was like, his body momentum was going into trying to jump as high as possible to break up a pass. And then he looked back and he saw that it was underthrown. And at that point, shifting your weight is just really difficult. And D-Hop had already seen, his head was already turned, and he realized that he didn't even go for the jump. He just went back towards the ball. So I think it was more just a bam, bam kind of move. But definitely, I mean, this team was talking about getting more turnovers, and we haven't seen it. But you know what? We haven't seen a lot of stuff that they said that was going to happen this season. So
that's true. But to their credit, even without the turnovers, this defense is elite. And I'll just say that in closing before we shift to the next set of grades is that I thought for sure when Jason Verrett went down, prior to that, I thought we were a top 5 defense coming into the league. I thought we were set up perfectly that if we stayed healthy, we would be a top 5 defense. When Jason Verrett went down in week 1, I immediately adjusted those expectations, and I think I adjusted them too far. I thought that would have a greater influence on our overall productivity as a defense than it has to this point. I still believe, given what we have seen to this point, if we see progression and we don't see a slew of injuries, which, you know, that's not out of the realm of possibility for this team. But as long as we stay reasonably healthy on defense and continue along this trend, I still think we have the potential to be a top 5 defense in this league with the way that they're playing to this point. In particular, if they can get some complementary football out of their damn offense and actually run the ball and maintain time of possession even better than we have to this point. Would you agree with that, or do you think I'm being overly optimistic there?
No, I mean, the way they played these past 3 quarterbacks, there's not any quarterback that's going to be significantly better that they're going to play this season than the 3 they just played. You know, there might be quarterbacks that are better, but not to the extent that it's going to be like they're going to be able to do ridiculous things. There's not going to be any receiving cores that are significantly better than the receiving cores they just went up against.
That's a fact.
So to have the type of success that they had against these past 3 offenses that didn't score as many, that were below their average scoring each game against the 49ers, to me, just shows that this team is elite because, like I said, the Cardinals were scoring 35 points per game. They struggled to score 17. The Seahawks were scoring way over, you know, the 28 points that they scored as well. And Green Bay scoring 28 points. We've seen them blow teams out and score way more, be in the 40s and 30s consistently as well. So the fact that these offenses that are really high-powered offenses struggled to score points against the 49ers, absolutely. They're a top 5 defense. And I would even say, Rob, even withstanding the injuries, because they've gone through all of these injuries, you know what I mean? And they're still performing. So what's to say that another injury is really going to make these guys play that much worse? I mean, they've played without any of all these players have been rotating in and out. So to me, I think that this defense will finish off top 5. And yeah, even better if they could have some scoring and, you know, be able to rest a little bit more on the sideline.
I just have to call out for those viewing and for those watching the video later that you have just experienced some optimism here. You have just heard some positive things about these San Francisco 49ers, even sitting here painfully at 2-3, having dropped 3 in a row. There is reason for optimism, 49er faithful. I am telling you.
I don't think so.
You got to hang your hat on this defense.
It doesn't lead the wins, as we've seen. So
it hasn't yet, Sunil, but it will. It will, my friend. Okay. All right. So we've wrapped up the defense. We've given the defense their credit because they deserve it. They certainly did their part. Let's move on to the third phase of the game here. Let's talk a little bit briefly about special teams. I thought that this was a reasonable game for special teams. I'll go through some of the highlights and lowlights in my opinion, which are we avoided the kick returns altogether, which quite honestly, after the last game was probably a good idea. So we didn't have any kick returns, but I would like to see whether we're going to go back with Trenton Cannon or whether we're going to move forward in that regard. Joey Sly was serviceable. He hit his extra point. He hit his field goal attempt. Can't ask anything more from my man Sly. Mitch continues to look good, right? Pinned a punt inside the 20, had another long one. The punt returns was an area of opportunity for me. It was underwhelming with Ayuk. He had 2 returns for 6 yards, and he allowed the ball to roll behind him. It was a short kick that landed somewhere around the 20 and then rolled to the 6-yard line on the 3rd drive of the game, pinned the Niners deep. So for me, I had to give the special teams a B- here.
Yeah, I think that's fair. B minus. They didn't do anything to really hurt this team, which was an issue last week.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't given very many opportunities to help this team, right? Sly's kick, you said serviceable. He looked better than Gold has as far as the way he kicked that field goal. And there was 2 opportunities that he could have gotten that maybe were 6 more points that could have been on the board, which may have changed the dynamic of this game, but it's not his job to make that decision, right? So, but he looked strong and he looked accurate, and I think that there was opportunities missed because of it.
Interesting question here. Bryant points out the idea that they didn't utilize Joey Sly enough. And certainly there was a vocal crowd on Twitter expressing that same sentiment, that this was a strange game not to take those points on a couple of drives, even though analytics will typically tell you that you want to go for it on 4th down. This was a departure for Kyle Shanahan, going for it at basically every opportunity on Sunday and failing to convert on the vast majority of them. Wondering what your thoughts are on that idea of going for those 4th down situations, as opposed to a few situations where you could have sent Joey Sly out there and probably would have 6 additional points on the board. Still not enough to sway the game, but a different ending, if you will.
I disagree that it wouldn't have swayed the game because of when those points would have been there.
Fair question.
So we're looking at the final score, but if this was a 7-6 game going into that last drive of the first half, maybe this defense, there's a lot of different scenarios that could have played out if there was points on the board versus just a 0 on the board going into the first half, right? But yeah, I mean, it's perplexing to me. Like, there's no, like, we look for patterns and we look to understand the mentality and what the decision making is of these coaches, right? You look at Bill Belichick and you kind of can tell he's going to play a certain way, right? And I remember when he didn't have a kicker that he trusted, he went for it on every single 4th down. And you understood that.
Right.
Last week, our kicker was our punter. And our punter has never been a kicker ever in his life. And in that scenario, when there's complete room to not trust, because he didn't even know he was going to be a kicker till like 5 minutes before he became the kicker and just went out there and started playing football, right? You took the field goal. You put it in this punter kicker's hands to score points. Okay, look, you stayed true to yourself. Hey, I'm going to take the points if I could get the points. Now this week, you had a kicker. It wasn't a punter / kicker. It was a kicker that was a kicker. And you went for it on every single 4th down. Don't understand, Rob. So to go directly to Bryant Culp, hell yeah, they didn't utilize Joey enough. They didn't utilize him at all. They basically did it when they were forced to kick the ball and get the field goal because it was not close enough to go for it on 4th down. And you just had to get close enough in a 10-point game, get the field goal. But yeah, it could have been completely different. And like Bryant is saying again, every time you score, it shifts the game. That's absolutely true. So going back to your point, yeah, in the grander scheme of things, 6 points doesn't get you a win, but 6 points changes the dynamic of that game. With the way the defense was playing, I think this would have been a much different game if we took the points.
Yeah, you certainly can't just say, hey, it would have been 6 additional points, therefore the game would have turned out 17-16. To your point, that it would have changed the outcome of the game. It would have changed the way in which the game was played. And I think that the point I take from what you just said there that is most compelling to me is is the erratic nature of the calls there. The idea that the week prior, when it would have made sense to go for it on all those fourth down and kicking scenarios, you decided to kick. And then this week, where the game felt a hell of a lot closer and was the style of game where points matter, now you decide to open it up. And it just does not seem to jive with common sense. It doesn't seem it screams of someone who's feeling somewhat desperate, who isn't sure what play they should be making here, thinking, well, should I maybe I'll do this, right? And just acting erratically. That does seem to be the feel of it. It's unfortunate. And that is a perfect transition for us here to wrap up talking about special teams grades, because who cares about special teams? And let's talk about the coaching grades, Sunil. This is the hot topic. I'm guessing that the comments will be rolling in on the side. But how did you feel about how our head coach performed in this one, Sunil?
Yeah, once again, it's unfortunate that DeMeco Ryans has to be grouped with these other coaches because it's lowering his grade, because he is the shining star out of all of these coaches and he gets an A+, but these other coaches get an F. Kyle Shanahan, the way he utilized Trey and just seemed to not give him any gimmies that he consistently gives to Jimmy, and just have him be out there in power sets where he's empty backfield and just treating him like he's Cam Newton, you know what I mean? Just running into people and one-on-one with linebackers and getting drilled. And it just looked painful for me, like to watch him take the hits that he took. And this is from a running quarterback that does really well sliding, because he wasn't taking hits when he was scrambling. It was only on these called runs where there was no room for him to slide, because he's hitting these linebackers at the line of scrimmage or just past the line of scrimmage. So I thought that was terrible. The fact that he didn't utilize a running game, which is the strength of our offense, is this running game. All of these linemen that we have on the offensive line are much better run blockers than they are pass protectors. So the fact that we're not utilizing these running backs and utilizing this running game as 60% of our offense, once again, I put that on the coach. And then, okay, you went for it on fourth down. Look, that's a decision that coaches have to make.
Sure.
But the play calling, oh my God, was atrocious. To go for a sneak with juice that you used just the week before that gained you 1 yard, but you do it on a 4th and 2.
Unbelievable.
Like, doesn't make any sense to me, especially when you have a guy that could pick up 3 yards in his sleep in Trey Lance back there. Utilize him, right? And then the play on the goal line, why are you going left to right instead of north to south? You know what I mean? And to me, it's just unfortunate. I don't know if you remember, but I used to, I grew up watching football with running backs like LaDainian Tomlinson and, guys in that realm where at the 1 yard line, you give it to your running back and he dives over the line of scrimmage.
Right.
I don't understand why that play no longer exists. Like why it's all of these weird gimmicky type things where it's just 1 yard. You're at the 1 yard line. Sneak the ball or just give it to your athletic receiver that could just dive over the line of scrimmage and get that touchdown. To me, all of those things lead to Kyle Shanahan and the offensive coordinator, whatever it is, his name is at this point, they get an F. And even though that probably averages out to a C, I'm giving them a D because it wasn't good enough to win this game. And you got to put that on the coaching. It's not like it's all on the players for me in this game.
No, I'm going to take it one step further than you did, Sunil. I agree with you wholeheartedly that DeMeco Ryans earned himself an A+ with the way in which he coached the defense, going up against an Arizona team that is so well balanced, so dynamic, and so able to create these electric plays to keep everything in front of them, to play disciplined, for the defensive line to really contain the quarterback. Amazing. A+ for DeMeco Ryans. on the other side of the ball with our head coach, Kyle Shanahan, running the offense, everything that I saw was so atrocious and so aggravating to watch, so infuriating as a fan. And yes, I'm allowing my fandom to overcome my pundit status here. I am going headfirst with my 49er fan feeling on this one, and the average for me comes out to an F. I don't know how that works. I don't even think it can, but it is in this scenario. You're getting an A+ averaged out with such a poor grade on offense that it's still less than 60%. So I'm going to give it, maybe 100% for D'Amico is 0% for Kyle. And so you end up at a 50% average, which is still an F in my book. So coaching, an F. It just, even the miss high, right? This is something that's continually been an issue for Trey, to throw high. And so for that pass over the middle of the field to Travis Benjamin, had that been on the sideline and he sails it, it goes out of bounds. But a play call that directs it to the middle of the field with a safety deep behind it, you have to almost realize that that is a potential for Trey to overthrow it and end up with an interception. To me, it was crazy to draw up all of these quarterback draws that we saw. 12 designed carries for Trey. It sure seemed as if Kyle was determined not to protect his rookie quarterback, to allow him to take as many shots as he did, and to basically not care if he got Lance killed on Sunday. That's the way it felt emotionally as a fan. It seemed as if, and this is not a one-game trend, but it feels like Kyle is playing some combination of tight or desperate, because it goes back to these decisions that you're seeing. The decision to play Travis Benjamin over Brandon Ayuk, just a little bit off. The idea of 12 designed runs for your quarterback and only 10 for your running backs. Again, it just doesn't make sense. And it feels as if Kyle is attempting to do more than he needs to because he's feeling the pressure that this season unraveling in the way that it is now putting on him as the head coach. He seems to be handling it very, very poorly.
James asked earlier, he said, I wonder what Sunil's take is going to be on Shanahan.
Yes, I saw that, and I wanted to know the answer to that. Yeah. I'm going to put it up on the screen as you answer it.
He said, isn't he a Shanistan? And the truth is, James, yes, I was a Shanistan. But what I realized is Shanistandom is a cult, and it isn't true, and we had been hypnotized. I, being one of the loudest Shanistan voices, was hypnotized. And just last week, I wrote an article talking about how Shanahan isn't the genius that we keep hearing that he is. And I'll take it one step further, and I apologize because the sirens are coming in the background.
It's because you're spitting fire.
You're hot
spitting
right now.
Fire.
Look, something is going on with Shanahan outside of football. And let me tell you why. And this might be an article that I'm formulating in my mind as we speak.
I love it.
This offseason was a different Shanahan. He was drinking with his former players, throwing footballs into pizza ovens. He was treating the media in a different way than he has in the past. Very nonchalant, very passive aggressive, which is pretty similar to who he is, but like it was even more of like an FU to the media. And now you extend it into the offseason and how he handled the quarterback situation, which we
trade up to 3.
Yeah, all of that was all kind of like was just off. And then you go into just the play calling this whole season, and it's like, what is going on? And I wonder, Rob, if the fact that he hasn't been able to get any of the quarterbacks that he wanted, and maybe Matthew Stafford choosing the Rams over him, I think his ego is hurt. And I think he's grasping at straws, and he's realizing that he could care less about what us fans think. But what if the the quarterbacks in the league. What if he is starting to find out that they don't think that he's the guy that he thinks he is?
Ooh.
What if the league is starting to think behind the scenes, not the people not the journalists, not the fans. I'm talking about the players and the brain trust are starting to doubt his genius. Maybe that's what we're seeing right now. I don't know.
It's fair to wonder. I like AJB coming in with your initial rant. We've been hoodwinked. We've been bamboozled. Yes, that is how it does feel at this point.
Give the last one he did too. Cabo life. Maybe Cabo is what messed Kyle Shanahan up, because ever since Cabo, we've been seeing this downward spiral of Kyle Shanahan, where Sean McVay, his rival, got the prize that he wanted. And look, Kyle Shanahan doesn't seem like he plays well when he doesn't get what he wants.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you in the idea that we had a certain expectation of Kyle, and that's not being met. I differ from you in that I still do believe, maybe I'm still hoodwinked, maybe I'm still bamboozled.
You are.
But I still believe in the genius that is Kyle's play design. However, I am losing faith in the individual's ability to actually coach. And James here puts in an interesting comment. We don't need a perceived genius. We need common sense coaching. And I do think that is the area of opportunity for Kyle. I think that he has not improved as a head coach. As a matter of fact, you could probably argue that he has gotten worse. He has been consistently outcoached by his defensive counterpart, whether that was Robert Saleh or now DeMeco Ryans. With Robert Saleh, at least it took a little while for Saleh to come in and outcoach him. DeMeco, right off of the bat, is outcoaching an experienced offensive genius head coach. So to me, with what we saw in 2019 and the offense that they put on the field that year and the way in which Kyle drew up the run plays in particular, that to me is undeniable genius, that there is something special there. So that is what I keep getting caught on when I try to move past Kyle being a great coach. But what I'm realizing is that is the critiques that I've almost always had of him are actually potentially crippling critiques and not just something that, makes him less of a great coach. It could actually be detrimental to his success as a head coach. And that is what seems to be the inability to be a good leader of men, because it doesn't seem as if he takes accountability. It doesn't feel as if he is a servant leader to the rest of his team. It doesn't feel as if he does what he needs to do to build up the players around him to be successful. And then he seems to overthink it. He seems to get too cute in moments where all it takes is good or average play from the offense at best, and this defense could carry us. And yet he seems determined to want to work in these gadget plays that this year are not working. And let's say this, if you don't execute on a couple of gadget plays in one game, you can blame your players for that. If you're consistently missing on these incredible plays that you draw up that need players to hit specific marks at specific points, if they are continually missing those, where's the failure? The failure is of the head coach to properly prepare his players for those goddamn plays. And to me, that's the frustrating part, is not feeling like Kyle is stepping up and saying, you know what, this is an underperformance by this team, and a lot of it starts with me, and I'm going to fix this. I don't get that sense of culpability from Kyle. It seems to be, well, we're missing in these areas, and without saying it, pointing fingers at a lot of the faces in the room that are not named Kyle Shanahan.
Kyle Shanahan is another version of Jason Garrett with the Dallas Cowboys. All the talent in the world, could never make it and win the Super Bowl with it. And unfortunately, Jed York's relationship with Kyle Shanahan is the same relationship that Jimmy, who's the owner over there in Dallas? I'm sorry,
Jerry Jones.
Jerry Jones had with Jason Garrett, where they love him, like they love each other like a father-son. And that's the reason why Shanahan will still be the coach of the 49ers, even though his performance should be a fireable offense.
That's a really interesting comparison, a comp right there, Sunil, because you're talking about someone who, in one aspect of coaching, really hung his hat on what he could produce with that offense there in Dallas, but as a head coach, couldn't produce. And while Kyle, frustratingly, as an offensive genius, hasn't been able to hang his hat on the offense, has done some good things that he can hang his hat on, but the overall picture is very concerning. And the winning on the field is the underlying issue, because you have the one great season. And to me, that's the only reason that it's not, Kyle on the hot seat at this point, is 2019 was so spectacular that bought him the additional time. It won't be long, though, Sunil, before I am much more in your camp and I'm ready to start talking about what are our other options. It needs to
be
get
after
fixed.
This season. It has to be after this season, Rob.
It needs to get fixed this year.
Kyle Shanahan hasn't shown in the last 5 years the ability to develop a quarterback. And the only way this 49ers team turns the corner and stops being an average team, because let's be honest, the last 5 years, we are an average to below average team with one spike, right? Even a broken clock is right 2 times a day. And that was our broken clock year. Every other year, we are a team that doesn't make the playoffs, that's picking in the top 15 to 16 picks every single year. That is not a good franchise. Those are facts, right? So there's a coaching staff that might be up for grabs that is doing an amazing job with quarterback development in Buffalo, in Brian Daboll and Ken Dorsey. And he's not going to be available after this offseason, because either Chicago is going to grab him or the 49ers need to be in there trying to grab him. Because if we could get Daboll as the head coach and Ken Dorsey comes in as the offensive coordinator / quarterbacks coach, what we see with the development of Trey Lance is going to be leaps and bounds over if we continue to just hope that Kyle Shanahan is going to figure it out. Because how many years do you get the chance to figure it out? Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl, and 2 years later, he was fired because of the way he handled his quarterback situation. Kyle Shanahan has not won a Super Bowl, and he's still not on the hot seat. Tell me why that makes sense when a Super Bowl winning coach gets fired before a coach that's lost more than he's won. Doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, and I can't make that make sense for you. But what I will say is I think that this season isn't over yet. And if it goes badly enough, as secure as I believe Kyle Shanahan is at this exact moment in time, if this thing goes completely off the rails by the end of this year, I think that there is every chance that Jed does something a bit unexpected and we do see a chance to make a change if things go really badly, because things are setting up in such a way that they could go really badly. Now, I know that we're over here, so we're going to move on to our next topic here, but that transition sets us up very nicely for our second to last topic here, and that is who's going to be the quarterback after the bye. Let's get into this quarterback situation a little bit, and I want to ask you, who is most likely to start after the bye, both who should and who will?
So who will start is going to be Jimmy Garoppolo. Who should start is Trey Lance. And the reason being is Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't give us a dynamic on offense that could change the trajectory of the offense. It's not like Jimmy Garoppolo was scoring a lot of points in the last, other than the Detroit game. It's been a very big struggle, 17 points in, the Eagles game when that team was averaging, giving up 21 points. I think they got 28 points against Green Bay when Green Bay averages 28 points. And then what was it against Seattle? 11 when they average, or 21 when they averaged 26. So it's not like we're moving the ball and scoring a lot of points with Jimmy Garoppolo there. And we know Jimmy Garoppolo isn't getting any better. He's not going to become a quicker quarterback. He's not going to become that much more accurate. He's not going to get a stronger deep ball and all that kind of stuff. Trey needs a lot of work. The only reason why Trey should be starting is he could get better. And if he gets better at those things that he doesn't do very well right now, this offense will get better. And the only way this team could turn around this season is if this offense gets better.
That's a fact.
Because if they can't score any points, it doesn't matter how great this defense is, because they're playing pretty damn great, Rob. And they're keeping these bona fide superstar offenses to manageable scoreboard points, to where any competent offense could score enough points to be able to win the game. And we have below competent offense. And that's the only reason. I don't think Trey comes in and automatically makes this team a winner. I think he still has a lot of growing to do, but he could get better, which means this offense could get better. And this offense needs to get better. Why Jimmy will still start is because Cabo changed Kyle Shanahan, and he is doing everything that is opposite of what you should be doing. So unfortunately, that's what I think is going to happen.
Well, Mike Mosley agrees with you on the fact that 100% guarantee it's Jimmy who starts. And I think I'm in agreement on who probably will start that game. And it goes back to this mental state for Kyle in the idea that I think he is coaching erratically. It seems that he feels a bit desperate. He may not be, but that's how it comes across. It seems unpredictable. It seems conservative. It seems someone who's insecure about where they are within the organization. And it seems to me as if Kyle is more willing to start Jimmy and lose than to start Lance and endure those growing pains. And the frustrating part of this is the development and the inevitable, but what about next season? Because like many 49ers fans, I am getting to a point, it's not going to take very many more losses before next year is far more important than this year. We are getting dangerously close to that precipice. I think that Kyle is certainly being conservative in thinking that we're not there yet. The season isn't over yet. There are jobs on the line. And I get that. And that's a valid concern because I don't think, again, unless things go completely off the rails, I don't think Kyle is getting fired this year. However, I think that it's fair to assume someone's head will roll, whether that is Mike McDaniel, whether that is John Lynch, whomever it may be, even if it's just our quarterback coach, Rick Scangrello, someone's head is going to roll for this season if the 49ers don't turn it around. So I sort of understand this idea of, well, Jimmy's the most prepared to execute within this offense. And the only thing that I will say to that is that that's all Kyle's fault. Kyle's decision during the offseason set this up to be a more difficult decision than it should have been. Had we created an offense and a play package that better accentuated what Trey Lance does, had we moved on from Jimmy and gone with a bridge quarterback whose skill set matched up with Trey Lance's, we would have had an offense that could have accentuated what he can do. And currently we don't. And what we're left with is what we saw against Arizona. So who should start? In my mind, that depends on what you're going to do, Kyle. If you're going to roll out that same offensive package that you did against Arizona, then by all means, start Jimmy G. Because I don't know that Trey can overcome what he was put up against in that play calling debacle, whatever you want to call it. That was painful for me. And so, yes, to me, it should be clear cut. It should be move forward with Trey. He does so many exciting things. He has so many big play abilities. He is the future of this franchise. Give him a solid 3 weeks of practice. See how the guy develops, right? You have this perfect window to continue practicing with Trey, to allow Jimmy to get fully healthy in case there is something you see out of Trey in the next couple of games that makes you say, absolutely, we need to go back to Jimmy at this point. But it just strikes me as what could have been a very straightforward quarterback situation from the outset was totally dropped by this coaching regime. And we find ourselves where we are today with a rookie quarterback who was not given the chance to be successful, not given the reps he needed in preseason in order to get his feet wet, and now is purely relying upon his physical gifts and a quarterback that we knew would get injured, who is injured, that doesn't play well when he's injured, especially on lower leg injuries.
Yeah, I mean, I think that everybody feels like Kyle Shanahan is safe, but the Eagles had this same situation happen last season with Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts, and it ripped the locker room apart, and it ended up getting a coach fired, getting a MVP caliber quarterback traded, and a rebuild. I think people are underestimating how severe that this situation can turn out to be. And I do think that at the end of this season, if things are going the way that it continues to go, and I know a lot of people are like, it's too early, Sunil, it's going to change. And I'll preface this by saying, look, I hope you guys are right. The last 3 games, I said that the 49ers were going to lose. And each time I said, I hope you guys are right. And I am wrong. I haven't been wrong. And I do believe this is going to continue to go on because this team lacks a leader. And any organization that lacks a leader, when going goes hard and when there's struggle and stuff like that, it's chaos. And you can't have success out of chaos without strong leadership and strong character. And it seems like this team is lacking both of those things. So I think after this season, if Jed York is any kind of smart businessman and organizational leader, realizes that this team is going to need a culture change. And the only way to do that is to fire everybody that's part of the old culture, meaning Lynch, meaning Shanahan, the whole coaching staff, with the exception of D'Amico Ryans, and bring in a whole new staff. That's the only way to fix this situation in my books. And I think that does a great transition into our next topic. So I'll let you go.
Yeah. You talking about transitioning into our panic level here?
Yes.
Yes. That is the question, is for the 49er faithful, just how panicked should you be? This is a continuation of a topic that we did a couple of weeks ago after the loss to Green Bay, and didn't get back to it last week, but now we've lost 3 in a row. And so you can go back and see what we said about the state of the 49ers franchise after our last segment. But what we're looking at here is on the DEFCON scale. So this is looking at basically the state of the nation against nuclear war. So when we're at peace, we're at DEFCON 5. And when we get to DEFCON 1, that is the greatest level of concern. DEFCON 1 for the U.S. means we are at mutually assured self-destruction. Nuclear bombs are in the air fired at other countries, right? So DEFCON 1 would be nuclear scorched earth, fire everyone. It's time to panic. Panic! Anything beyond that.
And Rob, just to put this in perspective, we did this 2 weeks ago, and you were at DEFCON 3, and I was at DEFCON 2, just to show what changes may be there. So I'll let you go first.
I mean, I think I am approaching this from I'm not ready to move on from my original stance before the season started. I still believe in this team. I still believe that they can flip the switch and turn this thing around. So I'm looking at this thing as DEFCON 2, but on the verge of DEFCON 1, where we will be at mutually assured destruction, because this thing has all of the earmarks for the wheels coming off. I mean, we have mismanaged many things to this point in the season. Kyle seems to be disinterested. The quarterback situation couldn't have played out much worse. We're still fighting through injuries. We have a defense that's overperforming, but an offense that's massively underperforming. And these continual mistakes for me are reminiscent of a team that is not well coached. When you're talking about not being able to execute on specific plays, when you're talking about consistent penalties happening on both sides of the ball, when you're talking about erratic play calling, erratic special teams play, starting players that shouldn't be started and putting others that should be starting into the doghouse. It's just all over the map. So to me, this is as close to a worst case scenario as you could be just 5 games into the damn season.
Yeah. Nah. the sirens are blaring. You better get into your bunker because the bombs are coming. The planes, you could hear them in the air. And this is DEFCON 1. And this is a terrible situation, Robin. I know a lot of people are like, just be positive. It's still early and all this kind of stuff. Rob, I am one of the most positive, optimistic people on this planet. Rob, when we used to work together, when we were on Grant's channel, you and me were Mr. Positivity.
Yes.
Like I
Yes,
was
indeed.
always, the glass is half full. Things aren't as bad as they seem. I was wrong. Things are way worse than they seem. A team that is built around the run, that drafted 2 running backs this offseason, 2 offensive linemen that were all geared towards making the run better, bringing in a center that was a great run blocker, re-upping a right tackle that is only known for run blocking. To now not run the ball at all doesn't make sense. To have the type of play calling where you have a kicker, punter turn into your kicker 5 minutes before kickoff, and now you're going to treat him like he's a seasoned kicker and just go for it and just have him kick it 45-yarder as his first ever attempted field goal in the history when your actual field goal kicker struggles to make that kick. Doesn't make any sense. The fact that you have a guy that you traded up for in the first round in Brandon Ayuk be the type of superstar or on the precipice of being a superstar from last year's potential and performance, not only have 10 catches or 9 catches this season and maybe just a few more targets than that because he's catching pretty much everything that's thrown his way, doesn't make any sense. To think that a bye week all of a sudden is going to make this coach look in the mirror and be like, you know what? I'm messing up and I need to change the way that I'm coaching this team. Hey, maybe other coaches can. Maybe if this was Andy Reid, maybe if this was even Bill Belichick, because we've seen him change the way that he coaches and the type of schemes he runs and all this kind of stuff. But what are the common denominators between those 2 names that I just said? They are Super Bowl winning coaches.
That is true.
And unfortunately, me being a former Shannon hurts me to say this. We do not have a Super Bowl caliber coach. Super Bowl caliber winning coach. So I do not believe that he's going to make these changes. I do not believe he's going to figure it out. I still think he's going to be the passive aggressive guy in the media with the media. I still think he's going to, dog out supreme talent like Trey Sermon and Brandon Ayuk because maybe they don't listen to the type of music he likes, or maybe they carry themselves in a way that he doesn't like as far as his standards and so on and so forth, even though they're the best talent and will help this team win. And I don't think there's any saving this offensive line. And because those changes aren't there, there's no way to turn the season around unless Trey Lance becomes Patrick Mahomes. And unfortunately, I don't think that happens this season.
Whew. Sunil. All right. That took me down the pessimistic view of a potential end to this season. I'm just going to flip it around and give the optimistic view before we close out this show so that we can end it on a positive note, even if that's false optimism. Please. Even if that's not the case. What strikes me in all the areas, by the way, I don't disagree with any of the critiques that you have of this team and the concerns going into the bye week. The difference that I have is the belief that all of these things can be quickly adjusted and turned on their head. The strange, erratic play calling by Kyle, if he would simply just simplify his offense a bit, get back to the brick and mortar of what has made this offense successful. If he can lean on that run game as he has in the past, if he can somehow get away from this idea of sending messages to players and just get back to playing the game, put your best players on the field and allow them to execute. It is maddening to see this team week in and week out make very strange decisions and plays on the field that end up losing the game. But I am hanging my hat on this defense that I thought was top 5 coming into the season, that now I am reinvigorated around the idea that they are, in fact, a top 5 defense. So that gives me the optimism to say that the defense will allow us to hang around just long enough for Kyle to wake up, get this offense back into gear, get one of our quarterbacks playing at a level high enough, game manager level, decent enough to be passable for the offense, and allow this defense to be elite and keep building momentum, keep building positivity toward the end of the season. It's a long 17-game season, and we're only 5 games into it. If we can turn it around at the bye and start making progress when we play the Colts, this thing could turn around quickly. I think that the negative momentum is snowballing on us right now. 3 losses in a row are ugly and will continue to get uglier if things are not addressed. But I'm not willing to give up on the idea that they can be addressed at this point. And I think we see a different 49ers team coming out of that bye.
Hope you're right.
Well, for the 4th time, Sunil has said to end the show, I hope you're right. The last 3 times, I haven't been, and he has. So 49er faithful, let's pray that 3-game losing streak for the 49ers and for me end on the bye week. We will be back next week, despite the fact that it is a bye, over on Sunil's channel on Tuesday. We're still working on the name for the show. We're still looking for you guys to throw in the ideas around what we're going to call it. But the Sue and Schuh show rocked it today. Sunil, thank you so much for joining me. And I look forward to our continued dialogue of this massive train wreck that is the 49ers season at week 5. Sunil, thank you so much.
I appreciate you having me on, man. We'll do it again next week.
Cheers, 49er faithful. If you haven't subscribed to Sunil's channel, get over there and subscribe.